Alright boys, welcome back to BBR. Last week we squeaked out a dub against D-Ray. Big man put on a clinic and hopefully he can do the same this week. A little spoilers for what the team is holding. We're playing Obo and his Morpico United, obviously one of my best friends in the world. You can check him out in the top right hand corner or down in the description below. So Obo and I do this thing where I like to get in his head a little bit about the matchup, and I like to openly talk about what I think does well and what I think does poor, and who has a good matchup, who doesn't have a good matchup. And this time, it's very blatantly clear who has a good matchup and who doesn't. It's Obo. He has a fantastic matchup, and he has not been shy about letting me know that. He very much so believes that he has a fantastic matchup here. And I'll be transparent, I got deep in my bag to try to build a team to manage to pull out a dub here. I think that if we win here, it has to be purely based off of skill, not out of the team builder, because I feel like I'll go a little bit more in depth, but pretty much no matter what we can cook up, Obo has some sort of a counter for, and not only that, but usually 2 or more counters to literally anything that I can think of. I got deep in the bag. I thought about so many different things, and ultimately I decided to bring maybe the most heat team that I've ever brought. If it works, fantastic. If not, then that's fine by me, I guess. I tried my best to cook with what I think is a pretty poor matchup. If you missed the transactions last week, we dropped Araquanid. Araquanid is horrible, and we picked up Qwilfish, Little Man, because I think it's really funny to have both Overqwil and Qwilfish on the same team. However, there was a drop recently where now Dondozo is a free agent, so I kind of regret dropping Araquanid when I did, because this team would just so very much so appreciate Dondozo and the unaware Pokemon. Maybe it's just because I like him, dude. I don't know. I like Dondozo. I wish we had him instead of Little Man, but we got Little Man this week. And I'll be completely honest, I built this team 4 days ago. I was deep in my bag one morning, just completely stressed out. It took me quite a while to come to a team that I actually like. I built 3 or 4 different teams, and ultimately I decided on the team that we're going to talk about now. But that's enough of me yapping. Let's go ahead and talk about Obo's team, what he's got, and why I think and why he thinks he's got a fantastic matchup. So he's got Urshifu Single, Iron Moth, Lando T, Rotom Wash, Jirachi, Cyclizar, Brambleghast, Galvantula, Sneasel, and Florges. A really bad team on paper, right? You would think, right? So the reason that we have such a poor matchup, first of all, Urshifu doesn't have the greatest matchup in the world, actually. I think Urshifu, if it comes, has to be Scarf based on what we have and the sets that we could potentially bring. Just the fact that we have LATIOS and we have Weavile and we have Andy Shocks, I do very much so, and knowing how Obo plays, I very much so believe that he will be Scarf, especially because of how blatantly obvious the Colbur on LATIOS is from our end. I think Scarf Urshifu, free U-turn, we can't really punish that. We have Comfey, but he has a lot of great switch-ins to Comfey, Jirachi, Iron Moth. Even something like Landorus can potentially take advantage of Comfey because it is just so weak. So I think that a Scarf Urshifu just simply makes the most sense in this matchup. And because I know how Obo thinks, I do not see a world in which he's not Scarf, just because I know who Obo is. Past that, Iron Moth. Iron Moth is probably the single best Pokemon on Obo's side of the field. I don't know why we are facing Fire type after Fire type after Fire type. I feel like Fire type is one of the least necessary types in draft, and we have just faced Elite Fire after Elite Fire, man, and it has been a brutal beatdown for us in the Fire type gauntlet. But we got little man. Oh man, it's gonna be tough. Our resists are like LATIOS and maybe AV Annihilate, who knows, maybe I'll bring that again. We could also throw on AV on Andy Shocks and he can actually kind of pretend to be a check. That was something that I definitely considered. Same with the Overqwil, but a Fiery Dance boost kind of nullifies Overqwil as that. So it gets Psychic. It's gonna be booster special attack with agility, more than likely, if not the reverse, and be booster speed with just Fiery Dance. And it's gonna be 3 attacks, more than likely. It's gonna be Fiery Dance, it's gonna be Sludge Wave, it's gonna be Psychic. I think those are the 3 moves that he really needs. And he could also throw on D-Gleam, because D-Gleam does a ton of damage to the LATIOS. If he does opt to go a booster speed set, that would make a ton of sense. But if he has agility, I think D-Gleam is the one move that he keeps off. I hope that makes sense. Next up, Landorus. Landorus does fantastic into me, and I know exactly how Obo thinks. He's gonna be Mirror Herb. Hold on, I built a team of what I think Obo's bringing. He's gonna be Mirror Herb, he's gonna be Gravity, and he's gonna have Taunt. This is just gonna beat Skarmory outright, whether his last moves are U-turn Earthquake or Swords Dance Earthquake. I don't know, but we don't have ground resist, especially in Gravity. I very much so anticipate him to be a Gravity set, and there's very little counterplay that we actually have to a Gravity set. That's 4 turns of just getting beat down by Earthquakes. The next Pokemon that I think is going to come is going to be Rotom Wash. It's just a fantastic lead into us. Volt switches are pretty much free because Andy Shocks can't do a whole lot back. We can switch in on the Volt switch, and then we can Thunderbolt for 30 and die to a Hydro. So Rotom Wash makes a ton of sense. Last two moves, probably Willow, Pain Split, I'd imagine. He could also opt to be like a Discharge variant, a Thunder Wave variant to punish the Latios. That would definitely make sense, but Rotom in some capacity I do believe is going to come. And then Jirachi is very difficult for me to talk about. Jirachi is very difficult for me to nail down what potential set he might be here, because knowing how Obo plays, he would look at this matchup and he would go, Scarf. Scarf does great. U-turn, Iron Head, Fire Punch, last move. Probably Zen Headbutt. Maybe, does it get Heart Stamp anymore? I don't know. One of those things. That's how Obo thinks. He would be like, that looks good. Another option that he could be is lead Colbur with Rocks, and he could use this as his rocker. And those two sets and the difference in those two sets really dictated how I prep, because I do think it does come in one of those two varieties. It could also be Covert Cloak for the Latios Luster Purge, because Specs Latios does look very good into him. I won't pretend like Latios is a bad matchup. Out of all of our Pokemon, Latios is the best matchup for sure. He could be like a Covert Cloak variant. If he doesn't want to bring Florges, which we'll talk about a little bit later, he could use this as his Latios check. Otherwise, he could use it as like a Colbur Lure for our Weavile. He could use it as a lead rocker. He could use it as a Scarf Revenge Killer for Latios for Weavile and not really get punished, because the best ways we have to punish it are Skarmory and Andy Shocks, and both of which are extremely pressured otherwise. So Jirachi was super. It's not the best mod in the matchup, but it was the most annoying Pokemon in this matchup, because there are 3 sets that I could realistically see it being. Cyclizar, I don't think you bring Cyclizar. That doesn't make sense. I think if you bring a spinner, it's going to be Bramblegast. The only thing is, like, a lot of the items that I could bring on Annihilate, and a lot of the items that I thought about bringing on Annihilate, like Mirror Herb to copy the Landorus's Mirror Herb that I know he's going to be, Adrenaline Orb to be speed boosting under the Intimidate from Landorus, are all consumable items, and that makes it to where Poltergeist does not affect us. So it's like a little iffy on if he actually brings. I could also just bring no item on Annihilate. So it's like if he brings it, it'll be like Strength Sap, I guess, but then Defiant Annihilate, so that doesn't really make sense. Maybe like Leech Seed, Spin, Spikes, Poltergeist, Power Whip, like a combination of those 4 moves it could be. But at the same time, if he doesn't bring Bramblegast, I wouldn't be completely shocked. It's going to be very hard for him to get a spin off into this team. I've got 2 Dark types, I've got a Ghost type that, yeah, I will say beats it. It's a little iffy, but Shadow Sneak is also very good into the Latios, which, like I said, is the one Pokemon that does good in this matchup. So it's like Bramblegast could come. It's also facing me, so it would make a lot of sense for him to bring it, specifically because it's like my least favorite Pokemon. But there's also a lot of reasons for it to not come. So it is what it is. Galvantula is not coming. There's no universe in which Galvantula comes here or should come. I think Webs are bad into me. Defiant Annihilate, Levitate Latios, Bullet Punch Scizor. Like, the way Obo thinks, I know how Obo thinks. I know he's getting prep help, so maybe it's a little bit different, and maybe I'm leaning too heavily on the I know how Obo thinks train. But if it's just Obo's call, and at the end of the day, it's his final say, he is not bringing Webs into this matchup. It just would not make sense. He knows I love Boots on Weavile. I have Levitate Latios. I have Defiant Ape. There's 3 of my top 4 Pokemon right there that it just don't really care about Webs. So I do not expect to see that. Sneasel could come, but I don't really think so. It is fast, and it gives a Revenge Killer for Latios, and it is a little difficult for me to switch into, but I do have Skarmory, which can take it on pretty well, and it's probably going to be Rocky Helmet in this matchup if it does come, looking at the Pokemon that he has. And then lastly, Florges. I like clicked my tongue there. Let me redo that. And then lastly, Florges. Florges makes a ton of sense. I think he is one of 2 sets. I think he's either Covert Cloak or Latios, because you can take it on pretty well. I mean, not like the best, but you're able, if you're like Fizz Death, to take 2 of anything that I want to go for, Psyshock, Luster Purge, whatever, or your Scarf. And I actually think Scarf is a really good set into me, and really hard for me to play around. I have Scizor as my only real switch into that. Overquote maybe, and Skarmory maybe, but not particularly. They don't really take it on particularly well. Scarf Moonblast in general is a free click into me, and Florges is actually a lot stronger than a lot of people seem to think. So I think that Scarf Florges actually does make a ton of sense into me, and it could make an appearance. So if I got to nail down 6 Pokemon for you guys right now, I'm taking the top 5, and I'm taking Florges. I think those are the 6 that come, with Bramblegast being like he could make an appearance. Maybe Obo doesn't see the same thing I see in Florges and Rotom, and then Bramble could come and he just wants to fire off free Polters and have that Shadow Sneak in the back for Latios, or maybe he sees more value in Sneasel than I do and he uses it as a Revenge Killer. Both of those things are very possible, and I hope that me talking about Obo's team for like 10 minutes has led to you guys seeing why I think this matchup is poor. So I'll walk you guys through my thought processes first, and then I'll walk you guys through the actual team. So a little bit different here. So I built 3 teams. The first team, Obo, let me find it. Obo team 1. The first team, like I said before, the one Pokemon that I think does very, very well here, pretty much any way you slice it, is going to be Latios. I think it's hard to find a bad Latios set here, to be honest. I considered so many different things. Calm Mind was the original one that I went with, Calm Mind Colbur, but it felt very telegraphed, very easy to play around. Iron Moth could be booster, very easily be booster speed. Urshifu could very easily be Scarfed, Jirachi could very easily be Scarfed, and Florges could very easily be Scarfed, or I just don't outright beat Florges because it's just a very strong Pokemon in general. I originally had Calm Mind, Psyshock, Dragon Pulse, and Shadow Ball. Didn't like the set overall. I felt like it was good, and it could definitely net a KO, but there were just too many, even Sneasel, like there were too many, in Brambleghast Shadow Sneak, too many variations of his team that could beat this Latios set too easy. I also messed around with Dragon Dance. I thought Dragon Dance did very, very well, outside of the fact that Landers could pivot in and do an Intimidate on me, and also the fact that I would speed tie a booster speed Iron Moth. I didn't love that. He also has, again, double priority, Shadow Sneak on Brambleghast, and Ice Shard on Sneasel, and there were some other sets that I thought about. I thought about like a Weakness Policy Agility set for sure. That was definitely an option. Specs was definitely the set that I probably threw around the most and showed up in the most of my teams. Just Specs 3 attacks did very, very well here. I think Latios does really well here. And actually, one set that I did think of that I almost brought, you guys can skip forward, by the way, if you don't care about the things I almost brought. I almost brought Trick Sticky Barb because I feel like it's such an easy switch into either Florges or Jirachi, and I get to take away their item, which is really cool. Like, it's like a fake knockoff, and they take 1/8 every single turn. So that was something that I really just almost went with, but I ultimately decided on a different team variation, so I went with something else. But like tricking the Jirachi, finding out if it's Scarf or Cobra Cloak, same with the Florges, I thought would be very valuable information, and I almost went with that set, but I didn't. Annihilate, there were basically two sets, right? It was like, I didn't even test to see if it worked, but it was like Mirror Herb to copy the Landorus's Mirror Herb, or the set that I was really leaning on, like 90%, almost brought, was an Adrenaline Orb, Defiant, Bulk Up, Rage Fist, Drain Punch, and Gunk Shot. Annihilate. This would give me the +1/+1 whenever Landers comes in. I can bulk up in his face and take it on pretty well. Rage Fist, Drain Punch, Gunk Shot hits the majority of his team very, very well. The problems with this that I ran into: first of all, Scarf Urshifu, absolutely free. Second of all, Booster Speed Iron Moth is a very big possibility. If not, it is hard for us to OHKO it if we don't have a Rage Fist boost. If it's 50 base power, it's hard for us to OHKO it, and it can do so much damage back if it's booster special attack. Scarf Jirachi, very free again. Shadow Sneak Bramble, again. Like, there's just so many, like, we can't really set up in too many things faces. It's like kind of just Landorus. We have to abuse him as a setup target, and then I'm completely reliant on him bringing Landorus, and if he just does not see the same thing I see with Landorus on his team, then Annihilate would have been useless. So that was like the main set that I thought about before landing on what I actually landed on. Scizor was like not really thought about a whole lot here. I actually think Scizor was, out of all 9 of my Pokemon, Scizor was the one Pokemon that I never truly considered. I feel like it just has such a poor matchup into the top 3 Pokemon, specifically Urshifu, Iron Moth, and Lando. Bullet Punch wasn't super great here. Urshifu has really good Fizz Def, Landers has Intimidate, and Iron Moth is obviously, you know, 4 times resistant to it. So I thought that on top of, you know, Rotom, on top of Jirachi, it just didn't make a lot of sense. It didn't really fit any of the teams that I was trying to build. Weavile, I'll keep it a stack, was either banded or heavy duty boots always. If it was banded, it was 4 attacks, Shard, Spinner, Triple Axle, and Knockoff, because I don't really need anything that's not stab. I could throw on Low Kick for Sneasel, but it is what it is at that point. And then the other option was Boots, Sword Stance, 3 attacks, and those were like the only 2 options I ever considered. Compe was a big thinker here in this matchup. Big stinker maybe, but I had to think about a lot of different Compe sets. There was one I had that I really liked. It was all of these were max Fizz Def, by the way, for the Urshifu. We specifically picked it up for the Urshifu. Leech Seed Protect with Synthesis and Draining Kiss was like a big set that I had for a lot of builds, but ultimately I decided Brambleghast coming just kind of invalidates that, and I'd actually rather use Compe as a pivot. So once I decided that, every single variation of Compe was U-turn, Draining Kiss, 2 other moves. Andy Shocks actually has a really good matchup, a sneaky good matchup, because you wouldn't think so, because Lando T is actually just like one of the best Andy Shocks answers. Like, we cannot hit that dude, but booster speed, if Lando T is dealt with, actually did fantastic here. It outpaced both the Urshifu as well as the Jirachi and put on a lot of pressure, especially if he wasn't booster speed Iron Moth. So I did heavily consider booster speed Andy Shocks. I also heavily considered Rocky Helmet Andy Shocks. Get some extra chip on the Urshifu and on the Jirachi, some extra extra, what's it called, a little safety net against the Jirachi. Andy Shucks is always coming in this matchup. I liked what he offered. Literally the only thing that deters Andy Shucks in any capacity is Lando T, and I feel like if we can find an avenue to deal with Lando T, then Andy Shucks just goes crazy, and that's going to hold true in the final team as well. Skarmory was weird because on one hand, it can kind of take on like a Scarf Urshifu, not very well, but it can do it. It can get hazards up, but it also lets in Iron Moth for absolutely free, and we can't really have that. Iron Moth is like the one Pokemon that we really don't have a defense to. It's just the speed tier plus the typing and the stabs it gets. It's the Pokemon. Like, we don't have a lot for Iron Moth at all. So allowing it to come in for free with Skarmory is not something that I really liked. I did consider like an SD Weak Armor set. That was definitely something to consider, but its attack is just too low to really output that much damage. It would have been like SD Weak Armor, Dual Stab Drill Run, if I do remember correctly, which did pretty good actually, but I would have had to chip the Rotom, and Rotom's very difficult for me to chip with the Pokemon that I have in my opinion. So Skarmory was kind of an afterthought, but still considered for sure, because of the fact that it helped with the Urshifu and it helped with a non-gravity Lando, which is still definitely an option. Big Man was coming no matter what. I loved Overquill's matchup, Intimidate Shuffling for the Urshifu for the Lando. It gets ice coverage for the Lando as well. Dual stabs in general just does so good into this matchup, or I could use it as a spike stacker. I could use it for T-spikes even. If I want to force out that Iron Moth and figure out what its item is, that's also a great option. I loved Overquill. It was just kind of a matter of figuring out what set to bring. And then lastly, Little Man. Look, I think it would have been so funny to bring Big Man, Little Man the first week that we had it, whatever, week 5, into Obo. However, Iron Moth gets Psychic, and that like almost OHKOs us. We have like 65 base HP and 55 special defense, I think. It would have been brutal to bring Quillfish, so we couldn't fit it. So Quillfish, Skarmory, and Scizor were kind of after, not so much Skarmory, Scizor and Quillfish were like kind of afterthoughts. Still definitely threw them around on the builder. I did mess with, in the final build of my team, I did mess with a certain Quillfish that I'll talk about in a second. But those are kind of the thought processes here. I had to get deep in my bag. You can obviously see, like, I tried a lot of different things to find avenues to win this game, but the combination of just everything that he potentially has and could bring makes it very, very difficult for me to find what I really enjoyed. And finding a lead was hard too, because between Rotom, Jirachi, and Lando, the 3 Pokemon that I think he's most likely to lead, there wasn't really a great lead. Like, I could lead Andy Shocks, but Andy Shocks leads poor into the Rotom. I could lead Overquill, but Overquill leads poor into the Lando. I could lead Latios, but Latios leads poor into the Jirachi. So it was very hard for me to find a lead, and ultimately the team that I decided on is very funny. The first Pokemon is going to be the lead we decided on. It's going to be Andy Shocks. This is crucial because, as I said earlier, I think it's very hard for Obo to ever find a path to spin, because we have Annihilate, and his spinners don't like Annihilate. Not really, like, unless he hard polters, I guess. But like I said, it's going to be hard for him to do that, especially because I think I could have not brought an item. All of my items could be consumables on Annihilate. I think it's hard for him to really ever click Polter on Bramble. So Andy Shocks is like our best neutral lead with this Focus Sash into pretty much everything, except ironically the Bramble itself. Rocks are very free, pretty much almost no matter what. On turn 1, we are going to click Rocks, and we're Focus Sash to eat up whatever hit comes at us, right? The only stipulation of that is if Rotom is led, we are clicking Miracle. We are eliminating the Rotom immediately. That would help immensely with the final game plan that I'll talk about in just a second. Rotom should click Miracle, or should click Hydro Pump turn 1 for free. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. My only Hydro Pump switch in on this team that I'm bringing is going to be Latios, and he can just switch out at the next turn into either Florges or Jirachi for pretty free. So I think turn 1 you click Hydro always, and I Miracle, and I wipe you off the planet, as long as you don't miss. I actually really pray that he does not miss in that situation. Otherwise, if we rock in the face of Lando, we find out if he's Scarf or not. If we rock in the face of Jirachi, I don't think Jirachi would stay in. We just kind of rock on whatever comes in. And then we kind of have to play around whatever happens then. Like, if Lando stays in and Earthquakes, you might notice we're Hyper Beam. Hyper Beam is the best move that we have to do damage to Lando, and damage on Lando is crucial for this in-game. Another reason why rocks are so important and why we value rocks over spikes is because that health on Lando, we needed to go down fast. Hyper Beam does about 50% to a max HP Lando, if I'm remembering the calc right off the top of my head, and that 50% is crucial for the in-game. So if he Earthquakes us, we get our rocks up, and we find out he's not Scarf, we're Hyper Beaming. Goodbye, Andy Shocks. This is a lead, a one-and-done lead. get your damage off, do as much as you can, and die. That is what Andy Shocks is here for. Earth Power over Thunderbolt, by the way, because it's just the best neutral stab into everything except Rotom, and Rotom we have Mirror Coat for. And there's not really a situation where we should keep our Sash intact, or we shouldn't have our Sash intact. Maybe turn 1 we switch out. If he leads Rachi and hard switches, maybe turn 1 we switch out, but I don't foresee that very much so happening. So Andy Shocks pretty much is lead, get rocks up, Hyper Beam the Lando, and die. Pretty self-explanatory EVs, right? We have max speed to outspeed the Jirachi, max special attack to do as much damage to the Lando, and that's pretty much it. This is the best that I could do as far as the lead goes in this matchup. Again, like I said, this team is like fire, but it also just it might not work at all. So with that being said, the next Pokemon that we're bringing is gonna be Damp Rock Latios. Uh-oh, what are you cooking, John? Oh no, are you? Yeah, obviously I'm just gonna be Swift Swim Big Man in the back, but we'll talk about that. We're gonna be Recover, Rain Dance with the Damp Rock, Flip Turn, and Draco. And I'm gonna talk about another Pokemon that we're attacking Rain Dance on the exact same way in just a second, but I like Rain Dance on Latios because it's very free to get that off as we force a switch. The Jirachi or Florges should pretty much always come in because of how intimidating Latios is offensively to this team that does not appreciate Dracos. It has to bring out one of the 2 Pokemon that do not appreciate, or that do appreciate taking those Dracos in Jirachi or Florges. We get the Rain Dance off for free, we Flip Turn, and we go into one of our checks to said Pokemon. We have Draco as our sole move because I feel like otherwise on the Jirachi and the Florges we are able to Flip Turn and get into an advantageous position otherwise, and we have Recover for longevity just in case we need it. I didn't really think that a last move felt more impactful than Recover, just to keep this guy around in the late game, help with potentially the Iron Moth, things like that. Rotom, obviously, this is my switch into Rotom because I don't really have a switch in. And we're setting up the Rain Dance, obviously, for the big man in-game. We're going to be max speed to speed tie the Iron Moth, max special attack, super lame EV set, but very, very fun in what this Pokemon can do. Our next Pokemon is going to be Big Man. I could not find a win con that I liked in this game. So I said, you know what? Big Man just came off of a clinic. Hopefully he'll put on another one. Let's throw him out there. Let's see what we can do. And I found that other than Lando, Big Man just destroys. Look at this team with dual stab. Gunk plus Crunch destroys everything. The only thing standing in the way of that, really, other than, you know, potential Rotom being a little bit too healthy, is Lando. Lando intimidating shuffling us is horrible. We are Life Orb and we are Swift Swim or Max Attack Adamant. We can outspeed Scarf. I want to say Booster Speed Iron Moth in the rain. Let me double check that. Yes, we can outspeed Booster Speed Iron Moth in the rain, and we only need 3 attacks here. Dual Stab just does so good into him, and then Liquidation hits the Lando as well as the Iron Moth for very good damage, especially in the rain. And Swords Dance is just there in case we need a last move, like in case we have an opportunity to set up. I don't really foresee that happening. This feels more like a get this guy in a position and just do as much damage as possible situation. But if we have the opportunity to set up or the need to set up, then we have Swords Dance. We're also Life Orb, and I'm very uncomfortable playing with Life Orbs usually, but I feel like to get the damage output that we needed, because we're a little bit weaker than we would like with base 115 attack, we went with Life Orb because that just helps our damage output a little bit more, and health on this isn't crazy important because the priority in Urshifu Sucker Punch, Brambleghast Shadow Sneak, and Sneasel Ice Shard is not too concerning. Those first 3 pieces, Andy Shocks, Big Man, and Latios, were very much so I was just deep in my bag trying to figure out how I can get Big Man to win the game. The rest of the team is figuring out how I don't lose the game. Does that make any sense? The first 3 were all about positioning, getting into a good spot to win the game. The last 3 are like, okay, he has this, I need this to not lose to it. The first Pokemon to show that off is going to be Comfey. For the Urshifu, obviously, it's literally the reason that we picked up Comfey was for Urshifu, because I felt so bad about our Urshifu matchup with Diancie. We have Synthesis, U-Turn, Knock Off, Draining Kiss. Knock Off for the incoming Jirachi. We can knock off whatever that guy is holding. Draining Kiss to actually have a way to damage, excuse me, the Urshifu. U-Turn for momentum on the potential Jirachi, Rotom, whatever the case may be. And then Synthesis for longevity. Didn't overthink it. We're just max Fizz Def. This guy is here for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to take on the Urshifu. For Rocky Helmet, we get to see if he's Punching Glove or whatever the case is, but we literally need this Pokemon to not lose to Urshifu. Following that, we didn't have great ways to revenge Lando. Like in that sequence, turn 1, if we Hyper Beam the Lando, it was like, okay, well, what do we go into following that? Do we go into Latios? And I wasn't really comfortable with that, so I decided to bring Weavile. And you may notice this is our second Rain Dance sweeper here. The same way that people use offensive rockers like Mega Mawile and things like that, Mamoswine, things that force switches to get rocks up, we're using the same method to get rain up, to hopefully sweep within we're using the same method to get Rain up to sweep with Big Man in the end game. This one is not a Damp Rock set. I liked Heavy Duty Boots on this guy better because I do think this guy has a lot more usability and a lot more offensive pressure put out than LATIOS, just because of the set we're running, because we have the ability to run more moves. We have Shard for priority, we have Triple Axle, just do as much damage as possible, and Knockoff is very, very free into this team. The way I envision it is we get to a Rain Dance up as the Rotom comes out, maybe we knock him off, we're able to get some damage off, we go Big Man as a last-ditch effort, and we're able to potentially win the game late. Weavile is very important because it allows us to revenge the Lando, it allows us to revenge a non-Scarf Rachi, it allows us to revenge a non-booster speed Iron Moth. Weavile's speed tier is just so elite here, it was very difficult for me to leave him off. And then lastly, we got Spanky. It was very difficult deciding between Annihilate and Skarmory in this last slot because you may notice we only offensively pressure Lando. We do not defensively pressure Lando at all. There is no part of this team that it likes to switch into Lando. It's like aggressive LATIOS, and that is it. And it does not like taking U-turns. So we went with Assault Vest, Annihilate over that because I feel like we pressure Lando a lot better offensively than we do Iron Moth, especially if it's booster speed. And Annihilate allows us to not immediately lose to the Iron Moth. Where U-turn, Rage Fist, Drain Punch, Earthquake because we obviously want to have a way to hit the Iron Moth to be able to actually OHKO it. Drain Punch and Rage Fist are self-explanatory, and so is U-turn. We're enough speed to outspeed like a 64 speed Jirachi. I got super in my head about what speed the Jirachi would be because I'm like, Obo will creep this, and then he'll creep me creeping this, and he'll creep me creeping him, creeping me, creeping him. There's a lot of words going on. We outspeed like 64 speed Jirachi. We have enough special defense to live a Fiery Dance into +1 D-Gleam, if I remember correctly. And then we have the remainder into defense. I'm now realizing Psychic is base 90 power, and D-Gleam is only base 80, so I probably will go back and change the spread a little bit, just remove a little bit of defense, put a little bit more HP and split def. But that is the current set that we're rocking with, and that's the team we're rocking with. This is a very do or die, that's not even the right term. This is a very hit or miss team. Like, if this works, this will be awesome. And the reason I think it will work is because I know Obo's getting help from some pretty good players, namely Kaz this week. And Obo does this thing where if he's not prepared for something and it shows up in the game, he panics, he takes up his entire timer, and he does not know what to do. So I'm very much so hoping I'm able to throw Obo off, and I'm able to do that exact thing and pressure him in that sense. Whenever he sees Hyper Beam Andy Shocks, whenever he sees Mirror Coat on Andy Shocks turn 2, this dude is not going to know what to do. And I'm very excited for that, to potentially see his reaction to that, and hopefully to see this work, and hopefully have Big Man get 2 sweeps in a row. That would be ideal. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Shout out to Sunny for editing the video. And for now, guys, this has been John Jr. signing off. I don't know why we are facing fire type after fire type after fire type, because I feel like fire type is one of the